So let's begin. The vampire's tattoo. What in the world is that talking about, and how does that relate to anything? Okay. So Bechlal, I have an interest in the Torah view. What Torah has to say about mythical and mystical creatures, supernatural animals, mermaids, werewolves, vampires, the lot. So let's jump right into it. Concerning vampires, there's a statement from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid in the Sefer Chassidim. And you'll see how this relates to Esav and what the tattoo is all about. It's fascinating stuff. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, so he's one of the Rishonim in Germany. He's part of a group known as the Chassidei Ashkenaz, the pious people of Germany. And they were pretty much his father, whose name was Shmuel HaChassid, sometimes referred to as Shmuel HaNavi. He was an incredible Baal Ruach HaKodesh. He created a golem. He's one of the few people in history we have documented made a golem. And he had a pet lion. And he used to travel. When he would travel, he always traveled. In old sources, I don't know offhand the original source, but it's in other words, there's only a handful of people that we have, in good sources, a tradition documented as in,
in good sources. Teacher do it, make a golem?
What Reb Ezer, Buzriel, the teachers he had in Kabbalah, did they make golems?
No,
not that I'm aware of.
Didn't he get? There's in the biography, the biography with the Ramban,
the English one?
Yeah.
Okay, from Schulman.
I don't know. It's from
where he says in the beginning of each one that these are all exaggerated stories. Either way, I don't know. What does it say? That he's teach. The Ramban had two teachers in Kabbalah.
Yes.
Reb Ezra and Reb Uzriel, and we have a strong tradition that they showed in miracles about Kfitzis Haderech, but I don't know anything. What do you read? What do you see about a girl?
That how they were accusing everyone in Spain back then for witchcraft.
Okay.
So they
decided to do it?
No, he didn't do witchcraft, but he was they heard that he was giving talking to people about Kabbalah, so they arrested him, and in Spain they burnt everyone at the stake. That was their thing. When they burnt him at the stake, there was no screaming, and everyone was freaking out because it was completely calm, and he didn't melt; it just fell apart. And then he showed up a few days later.
We learned a story about this from Seder Haderis when we went through the Ramban. It was a bit different than saying he died and then he came back.
He wasn't dead at all. He just replaced himself with a golem.
Okay. I haven't seen that story. We had a story we saw in Seder Haderis about the Ramban's Rebbe. Well, he went into a cloister, destroyed all of the tzlamim, and they threw him in jail. And then there was a whole miracle how he was saved. Ultimately, he wasn't. Anyway, fine. So you had Shmuel HaNavi, Shmuel HaChassid. Then and he had, like we said, he would travel around. He had a golem on one side, a lion on the other. Then he had a student, his son, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. And Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid had a student, Rabbi Elazar Rekeach, Rabbi Elazar of Worms, of Germaiza. And these were all major Kabbalists, very holy people. And Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, he apparently authored the Sefer Chassidim. Yes. And he wrote many Sforim, the Rekeach, wrote many Ruziel, Hamalach, etc. So says the Sefer Chassidim. And Bechal the Rabbeim said fascinating things about Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, as is well known. Yesh noshim, there are women shekoirin lahem. We call them strayas, marash, varvals. Pirish, that's a mermaid. Mechashves shoynes zumizu, different types of witches. Oison nivru, they were created bein hashmoshes. In the beginning of creation, on Friday afternoon, bein hashmoshes, the Eibusha created many miraculous beings. Sheyasu dover, that they can do something, v'yishtanu mibriyasan, and they will change from their existence. They can change forms. It sounds like Isha achas hoiser studia. There was a certain woman who was a studia. V'hoisa chayla b'yoisa, she was very ill. V'hoyu shtei noshim b'layla ima. There were two other women with this striya. Achas hoisi yeshena. One woman was sleeping. Achas hoisa, other one was awake. V'oisa hachayla, that striya who was ill, she needed to get their blood to keep her life force going. Amda lofaneha. That striya who was sick stood up in front of the woman that was sleeping. Anyhow, she was combing her hair. She wanted to fly, take a big leap. She wanted to squeeze out the blood of the woman that was sleeping. The woman that was awake, suck out, squeeze out, right, suck out. And the woman that was awake, she wakes up Hayeshena, the woman that was sleeping. The Tafsu, and the two of them grab the chayla, the striya, and fine, they knocked her out. Afterwards, Yashna oid, the woman that was tired fell back asleep. But the woman that was up before, she remained awake. Amda hastriya, round 2, she gets up. She was combing her hair. She wanted to jump again and suck out the blood from the woman that was sleeping. And again, the woman that was awake, she wakes up the woman. The tafsu, together they grab the chayla hastriya. Now says Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, im hoisa mazekes, if she would have managed to damage, lohamis es isha acheres, if the striya would have killed the sleeping woman, hoisa hastriya chaya, she would have lived from the blood. But the kivan shelo yachla lahazik, since she didn't manage, she was ill, she was on her last legs, she tried to suck out the blood from the sleeping woman. The two women though overpowered her. Meisa hastriya, she died. Kitzricha es asher bo min ha'adam livloya hadam v'habasa. She needed to swallow the blood and the flesh that comes from man. V'chein werwolf, and so to a werewolf, also needs the blood of humans to survive. Ulefian, since hamora hastriya tzrichin lenafetz sa'aron kodim shifruchu, why was she consistently braiding her hair? Because they need to do that in order to be able to fly.
Fly where?
Across, to be able, I don't know, to get from one point to the other.
Room?
Yeah.
Aerodynamics.
Yeah. Let's skip the next line. They go, Misha makil mazekes.
Where was
If you hit the mazekes, if you hit this vampire woman, you hit her hard, oz then kusharoya oisa, eino yechayla lichish, you can't live, elim kein toichel milechem umelech shel make oisa. If somebody hits this vampire, the only way the vampire can live is if it eats from the bread and the salt of the one that hit her, and so to fakert. V'chein imizikov, if this woman, this striya, this vampire would suck out the blood from a human, hanizik tzorich lecho milechem umelech shelo. The damagee, the victim, needs to eat from her bread and her salt. V'chayzeres hanefesh kebatchila, and then the person will recover. So this is a record in the Sefer Chassidim of this fascinating creature. And in English we call this a vampire. You have people today that convince themselves that they need to live off human blood. Doctors say it's just a Krankenkopf. It's a psychological mishugas that they convince themselves. But there definitely, at some point, apparently used to be a mystical creature. It says it was the origin of these genes were created bein hashmoshes, the beginning of creation. Fine. So what does that have to do with anything? There are some that theorize that Esav was a shtickle vampire. Why is that? We have 3 sources over here, 2, 3, and 4. Take a look at number 2. In Parshas Vayishlach, Yaakov and Esav finally meet, the great showdown after many years. Yaakov spent 14 years learning, and he spent 20 years by love, and he finally meets Esav, the great showdown. So it says in Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, Omar Esav, said Esav, Eini hoideges Yaakov achi, I don't want to kill my brother bechitzim with arrows or bekeshes with a bow. Elo befi ani harga. I'm going to kill him with my mouth. Umoitzitz estomai. I want to squeeze out his blood, drink out his blood. No other way. I can kill him with the sword. I can use an arrow. I don't want that. I want to get his blood. Shenemar. Vayoretz Esav. He ran to greet Yaakov. Vayechabkeu. He hugged him. He fell on Yaakov's neck and he kissed him, and they cried. Not that he kissed, but and he bit. Why did he want to bite him? He wanted his blood. Dafka his blood. Yankov's neck became ke'etzem Hashem, became hard like a tooth. And that's what it says in Shirashim, Tzavorech kemigdal Hashem, your neck was like a tooth. V'ko shinov shel Esav, and Esav blunted his teeth. You know, he really got it. He got it hard. All right. So what do you see from there? Esav was dafka interested. What?
The source?
Pirke de Rabbi Eliezer. Perek Lamed Zayin. He dafka wanted the blood, but it gets even better. Look at number 3. We know when Esav was born, and you'll see why we're talking about Esav. When Esav was born, Vayetze Hodishin Admaini came out red. He was completely red. So Rashi quotes from the Medrash Rabbah, why was he red? As Simon is going to be a murderer, he's going to be a Sheifech Damim. You know, it was an omen of the future that Esav is going to be a Sheifech Damim. But says the Yalkut Shemaini, you know why he was Admaini, you know why he was red? Sha'ad shuhu b'mei imoy, while he was in his mother's stomach, shasa d'mei nidasa, he drank the blood of her cycle. While he was in the uterus, whatever blood he was able to get hold of, he was drinking. You know why Esav came out red? Because he had drunk who knows how much blood while he was in a utero, while he was a fetus in his mother's stomach. Incredible. Look at number 4, is the Baal HaTurim on that same pasuk. Admaini, why did Esav come out red? Again, Rashi says it was natural, it was just a simon of what he's going to be. But you see the Midrashim say no, he was red because he was, infused with blood. The Baal HaTurim quotes for the Tanchuma, Malamed, it teaches me, Shehishchis rechem imoy. When Esav was in his mother's stomach, he was tearing apart the uterus. V'nizgoylel badam, he was wallowing in the blood. He was wallowing in the blood. Now you wonder why Rivka was going through so much pain, to the point she said, if it's so hard to have kids, lo mazeh anoichi. It's almost like she was having charata on the whole kid business. She was crying for years to have kids. How much pain? How painful could it have been? Well, according to this medrash, it was awful. Esav was pasha tearing apart her insides. Incredible. He was wallowing in the dam. But number 3, the Yalkut Shemaini says he was pasha drinking dam nidasa. Esav's malach. Esav's malach has the big. All right. Literally, mamish bloodthirsty. Well, that's exactly what. And he got chayes from it. Esav's malach has the fight with Yankov and Parshas Vayishlach. Right? They're fighting all night. Until when? Alois HaShachar, till dawn. And the malach says, get me out of here. Vampires can't handle light. So Esav's malach, the source of his energy, when the moment it's dawn, he scrams, he runs. Can't handle the light.
Is there any source in this that they can't handle light, or just...
No. This is just theories. These are just theories people
Rashi
have.
says why he left. You have to say...
Say Shira. That's Rashi.
Rashi
But in there's
about the blood from the regular perspective.
Right. Yes. Esav was very
Where's the
hairy.
makkah that vampires can't
No.
see light? That's the makkah.
No, right, exactly.
Got it.
That's popular
It all
culture.
comes from here.
Shvach.
From here.
No guy just made it up.
It's the one person we have that you see was
100%.
meshuga about blood. His own mother's blood. The dam nida, you know what? He just needed blood. He was wallowing. You see in number 4, he was wallowing in the blood. That's in human blood. That's what a vampire is all about.
Yeah.
What? I've seen baby. Yeah. Anyhow,
The exaggerations of what is it?
anyhow, this is just the Milsa de Bedichasa just to get us in. So what's the idea with the vampire's tail? The vampire's tattoo, sorry. So this is really where we begin. And we're going to go on a little bit of a journey about exactly how Esav died. And we're going to see a major kasha that the Chidah deals with. And we're going to see a couple ways of answering it. And we begin with number 5. Number 5 is a Tosfos in Masechta Gittin. Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. It's on a Mishnah. The Mishnah speaks about an awful halacha, a sorrowful halacha, that at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and in the aftermath thereof, the Romans, they were just killing Yidden everywhere. The bloodshed was massive. And Yidden were thrown off their properties. They ran for their lives. Goyim repossessed many Yiddish properties. But a couple years later, many of those Goyim wanted to go back to Rome. The soldiers wanted to go back home. They don't want to stay in Israel. So they want to sell the land to Jews. Now those Romans don't really own the land. Often they would threaten the Jew who was there beforehand. You want to die? You want to be a pauper? And the Yid would run for his life. The guy would repossess the land. It's not halachically his, l'chayra. And then a couple years later, this guy wants to go back to Rome. He wants to sell the land to another Yid. Yid number 2. So Yid number 2 is Shimon. And, he pays the guy X amount of dollars, right? The guy's not selling at a full price. The guy wants to get whatever he can and go home. The shaila is, does Shimon own it? He paid the guy. It's not the guy's land. Reuven comes back. Reuven's been in hiding for a while. He comes back and he tells Shimon, it's very nice you paid the guy for the property. He was not the rightful owner.
That's why they invented title insurance. Yeah.
So the Mishnah discusses this very halacha. And it says, B'Yehuda, in the area of Judea, southern Israel, Baharuge Milchama, during the time of during the time of the war, when Yidden were being murdered, the Mishnah says that any land that was repossessed by a goy belongs to the goy. Because you can be sure that when the goy went with a gun to the Jew and said, give me your house or I'll kill you, the Jew knew the goy would kill him, because at that time, Yidden were falling, unfortunately, left, right, and center. And the Yid knew without a doubt this guy meant business. And the Jew, in order to save his life, willingly told the guy, take the land. Take it.
How is that willingly?
Because the Yid really does want to save his life. It's chitzonius haratzon, but because the Yid knew that if he doesn't, he will for sure die, he completely is miyayish. He abandons ownership over the, it's yiyush. You abandon something, sometimes even if you don't want, but you relinquish ownership over it. And the Mishnah says, in Judea, during the time of the war, the guy would halachically repossess the land, although he didn't pay the Jew, to the point that when Shimon buys it from this guy who's called the Sikrikin, the sale stands. But nowhere else in Eretz Yisrael, even during the time of Harugei Milchama, let's say, you're living in the northern part of Israel, the law was different. There, if the guy told the Yid, get out of here, I'll kill you, the Yid wasn't willing. The Yid left, but the Yid had in the back of his mind, tomorrow I'll knock the guy out, because anywhere else besides Judea, the danger was not as clear and present and as real.
So
and Tosfos
the
wants to know
Galil
why.
would be
Tosfos
different?
wants to know what?
The Galil would be like...
Yes, exactly, be different, yeah. Because there, the Yid knew this guy might kill me, but because that wasn't the place of the war, the Yid thought that I'll give him the land today, but I'll take him to court tomorrow or something, I'll get it back. Anyhow, so Tosfos wants to know why was that? Why did the Romans, Dafka, come with their guns blazing on Judea? So it says Tosfos, Yerushalmi, if you look in the Yerushalmi, Barishain, in the beginning, Gazru Gzeir al Yehuda, you know why they made a decree against Judea? Lefisha Messiris biyadam, because the Goyim of Rome, who come from Esav, they have a tradition, Ma'avoisam from their Zaydas, She Yehuda Harag Esav. The Romans, the Eniklech of Esav, have a tradition. Who killed our Zayd, the Esav? Who knocked off Esav? Was Yehuda.
Wasn't it Naphtali's grandson?
Good, exactly. And the Yerushalmi says, what's the raya? In this week's parsha, Yaakov tells Yehuda, your hand is at the neck of your enemy. And the Yerushalmi learns from there, who's the enemy that Yehuda had his hand on his neck? Esav. Yehuda killed Esav. And therefore the Romans, Einiklech of Esav, Dafka wanted to target Yerushalayim, Judea, which is particularly the area of Yehuda.
Wasn't Yerushalayim in Binyamin's territory? Actually?
It's both.
It was both. It was based on Mikdash was kind of split. V'tanya, we learned in a Braisa Nami, if you look also in Sifri. Sifri is a halachic medrash on Dvarim. And in the end of Dvarim, you have Moshe's brachas. And Moshe says about Yehuda, Yadav Ravloi, that Yehuda's hands fight for him. The Sifri says, what's Moshe referring to? B'shah shaharag es Esav, when Yehuda killed Esav. So we have a Yerushalmi, we have a Sifri, that say clearly it was Yehuda that killed Esav. And both the Yerushalmi and the Sifri, they hinge this on a pasuk. The Yerushalmi learns it from a pasuk in this week's parsha. The Sifri learns it from the end of Zos HaBracha. So it says, Tosfos, in the end of the first parak of Soita, we say Chushim ben Don. We'll see the story in a minute. Shakal Kulfa, he took a baseball bat, a wooden stick, or Machya Aresha, and he banged it on Esav's head. We'll see the story in a minute. The Esav, v'notru einin, Esav's eyes flew out. V'noflu akari de Yaakov, and they fell by the feet of Yaakov. We'll see the details in a moment, but the idea is, like you mentioned, Chushim killed Esav. Says Tosfos, no. Chushim knocked Esav in the head. His eyes fell out, but Esav wasn't dead. Shema maybe loy meis ba'isakor. Maybe Esav didn't die from that hit. Ad she'amad alav Yehuda, until Yehuda got up v'harga and killed him. That's what Tosfos says. So Tosfos is saying there's two traditions. Was it Chushim the son of Don, or was it Yehuda? Nishkan kasha. Chushim started, Yehuda finished it off. And therefore the Romans had a tradition that Yehuda ultimately is the one that killed Esav. And that's true. And that's why they dafka wanted to wreak havoc amongst Judea. That's what Tosfos says in Gittin. Look at number 6, the Gemara in Saitan. Let's see what Itaka says. Kivan she'egiu. This is this week's parasha, when Yaakov is getting buried. And Yosef and the brothers and the whole entourage of Egyptians, they go to Eretz Yisrael. When they come to Marsa Machpelah, Esav comes, Yaakov. He gets in the way. He says, Mamre is called Kiryas Arba. There's room in the Ma'arsa Machpelah for 4 pairs. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Kiryas Arba, there's 4 pairs. Adam and Chava, Avram Sarah, Yitzchak Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. At this point, Leah was already buried. There's one spot left. So Zogt Esav, Ihu Kavre LeLeah B'didei. Yaakov decided to bury Leah. Now, B'chlal, when did Leah die? It's a big machlokes. We'll come back. It's actually important. Some hold Leah only died after the family went to Mitzrayim. And sometime during those 17 years, Yaakov went back to Eretz Yisrael to bury Leah. But there are clear midrashim that say that she actually died young. She was in her early 50s. And it was even before Yaakov B'chlal went to Mitzrayim the first time round. But either way, she was definitely buried there. Either way, she was definitely buried there before Yaakov. So Esav says, listen, Yaakov buried, after Yitzchak and Rivka are buried there, 6 out of the 8 places are taken. There's 2 left. One for me, one for Yaakov. Yaakov buries Leah. Hide the Payish, the one that remains. Didiyu, it's mine. So Amruleh, the Shvatim, told Esav, Zevinta, that you sold it to Yaakov. When you sold the firstborn rights. So he told them, you guys, that's not true. You guys are fools. A firstborn gets double. Meaning like this, if the father left the chveis 3 plots of land, and there's 2 sons, the firstborn gets 2, the other one gets 1. If the father only left 2 plots of land, it's 1 each. Right? If there's only 2 portions of Marsa Machpelah, why would Yaakov get both? That's not how the firstbornhood works. He said, Nihi dezvini b'chirusa. Yeah, I sold my firstborn rights. But pshitusa mizvini. But the rights I have as a son, I never gave up. I still deserve my plot. So they said, no, you did. It was a different sale. There was a separate sale. Now the Gemara doesn't record what happened. It's a Medrash Tanchuma that records. The Medrash Tanchuma says after Yitzchak died. Now Yitzchak died during Yosef was away from Yaakov for 22 years. About halfway during that time is when Yitzchak died. And after Yaakov buried Yitzchak, Yaakov thinks to himself, there's only 2 places left in Marsa Machpelah. One for me, one for Esav. Esau's going to be buried with these
He's gonna kill
tzaddikim?
him, no?
What?
He's just gonna-
Wait. The Tanchuma says, Yankov says Esau's going to be buried with these tzaddikim. I can't let that happen. He took all of the money that he got from Lavan's house. He made a big pile full of gold and silver. He told Esau, do you want the money or you want the grave? And Esau said, I'll take the money. So they told Esau, Yankov bought it from you, nothing to do with the firstborn rights. It's a different sale. Bekivri, Yankov himself refers to it in the cave that I dug for myself, or I made a pile of money. Rabbi Yechon said the same of Rav Shpi. Fine, I bought it, fine, whatever it is. So Esau told him, really, where's the document? They said it's in Egypt. Who's going to go? Naphtali. Fine. Go down a couple lines. Chushim brei de Don. The first line of the word is Don. So Chushim was the son of Don. In fact, he was the only son of Don. He was there. V'yakirin le'udnei. He was hard of hearing. He asks, what's going on? Why is Yankov lying here? So they told him, Esau is ma'akiv until Naphtali, who was swift, until he comes back from Egypt with the deed. So Chushim says, apparently he was able to speak. He says, well, until Naphtali comes back, Yankov is going to be lying here, bebezoyim. He takes kulfa, he takes his baseball bat, a piece of wood. Machya areshe, he knocks Esau in the back of the head. Natron ein, his eyes come out and they fall. Esau's eyes fall by the feet of Yaakov. Paschinu Yankov le'ene, Yankov opens his eyes. Va'achich, and he smiles. And this is what it's, even though he had passed away, this is what it says until him, Yismach Sadik, the righteous will be happy. Ki chaza nokum, he sees vengeance. Pa'amav yirchash b'dam harasha, his feet will rinse in the blood of the wicked. And at that time, Rivka's prophecy became true. She said, why should I lose both of you on the same day? Says the Gemara, they didn't die on the same day, but they were buried on the same day. That's the story in Sotah. By the way, the Zohar says a fascinating thing. The Zohar says, why did Esau's eyes pop out of his head? What type of punishment was this? His eyes. There's a fascinating thing. Rashi quotes, we know this, that Lavan had 2 daughters, and his sister Rivka had 2 sons, and everyone said the older for the older, right? Esau was going to marry Leah, Yaakov was going to marry Rachel, until Leah cried, and through her tefillah she changed, what was divinely ordained. Esau never forgot about Leah. The Zohar says Esau, his whole life, he wanted Leah.
Then why did he marry the Canaanites earlier?
Contradiction.
First of all,
many women.
Esau wasn't going to travel, travel far for a girl. But the Zohar says his whole life he coveted Leah. But he knew he's not going to get her. But on this fateful day, when Yankov's body was being brought to be buried, and Esau gets in the way, you know why Esau got in the way? Esau said, I couldn't have Leah while I was alive. I want to have her now after death. I want to be buried next to her in the Maras HaMachpelah. It's a credible Zohar. The reason Esau wanted that plot is to be buried next to Leah. I couldn't have her while I was alive. Let me have her now after I die. It was his eyes. His eyes that gave him this attraction. He never took his eyes off Leah. That's why his eyes were knocked out of his head. Azoi steht in Zohar. Fascinating thing. Anyhow, according to this story, though, you read the Gemara, it sounds like Chushim killed him. We saw Tosfos says no. Tosfos says Chushim only started. Yehuda finished the job. Why? Because there's a Sifri, there's a Yerushalmi. Yehuda did it. That's the tradition the Romans had. That's why the Romans were killing everyone in Judea. And they were right. Imagine if all those Yidden died because the Romans had a wrong tradition. No, it was the right tradition. Yehuda did it. The Gemara says Chushim, he started.
Couldn't it be for a much more simple reason that Yehuda was the most populated region where the rebellion was happening?
Right. You definitely could say that.
That's the
You
Pashut
definitely
Shah.
could say, but that's why Tosfos is telling you there's more to the story. There was a deeper agenda. There was a nekama, there was a vengeance going on over here. It had been building up for generations. And this was finally when they were able to take their
Romans
revenge.
really hated the Jews that much, so why at first didn't they start when they conquered it the first time? Why didn't they do this?
All right, okay. Everything. The Yidden then weren't deserving of punishment.
and the Romans suddenly were like
Well-
they didn't tell stories of Esav. They just
No,
started
they
doing
did,
it.
they did, but ultimately the Abishah didn't allow the destruction to
They got
happen because the
bolder.
time hadn't
They got
come.
bolder over time.
No, he said, listen, the Abishah feared the Welt. So ultimately, if the time hadn't come, so then the Abishah,
They started
you know,
with one
the-
thing, ended in another thing. I mean,
right. Anyhow, Al Kopanim, what's the issue with this? It sounds like a very innocent Tosfos. So the Chidah, I don't have it on the paper here, but in about at least 6 of his Sforim, he raises the following issue. He says Tosfos is mixing apples and oranges. Meaning like this. Yeah, the Yerushalmi and the Sifri Tosfos quote don't give much detail. They just say Yehuda killed Esav. Okay. The Gemara's story about Chushim doesn't say clearly that Esav died when he was hit in the head and his eyes came out. So Tosfos could thread these two things together. But says the Chidah, if you look in the other Medrashim and you get the full account of what happened, you will see that these are two distinct stories and they can't fit. The version of Chushim killing Esav, you'll see is Chushim and Chushim alone. We'll see the full version. And the story of Yehuda is Yehuda alone. And we're going to see, and you'll see that the Chidah is therefore bothered that Tosfos is mixing two completely different versions which are definitely at odds with each other. And you'll see as we go on. We go to number 7. Sorry for the Aramaic, but
who is it?
Targum Yonason ben Uziel. Yonason ben Uziel was a Tana. He was a student of Hillel, and he wrote a commentary on Nevi'im in Aramaic, and it's not just a translation, it's really a medrash.
Amuka. Amuka is innocent, but it's, no?
What?
He's
buried in Amuka.
Oh, where is is it?
What's Amuka?
Innocent, but it's
So there you
People
are.
What do
go
you mean?
there to.
So here's the funny thing. I'll tell you something funny though.
It's
There is an Aramaic translation on Chumash. In fact, number 7 that we have here is from an Aramaic translation on Chumash, which has the title. It bears the title of Targum Yonason ben Uziel. If you open up any Mikrois Gedolos, you'll see. The Chidah says he Bechal never wrote it. He did not write the Pirush on Chumash. He wrote on Nevi'im. This Targum on Chumash was written by another Tana, unknown, anonymous. When the printers printed it, they have to write a name, right? When you print the save on people to buy it. If you print an anonymous Pirush, who's going to buy it? So you have to throw a name. So they threw in the name Targum Yonason. So it's just funny that often people go to Yonason ben Uziel's caver, wherever in Amuka, and they take the Pirush on Chumash. It's just funny because the Chidah believes that it probably wasn't written by him, written by somebody else. But either way, if it wasn't Yonason ben Uziel, it's written by a different Tana, and this Targum is mamish authentic. And like I said, it's not just a translation; it's mamish a medrash. And in number 7, on this week's parsha, at the end of Vayechi, he speaks about the death of Esav, and he says like this: "Unatalu Yosei benoi." Yaakov's kids took him to the land of Canaan. Ushmiya piskama le'esav. Esav heard what's going on. Rashia, the wicked man. Unatal, and he came from Tura de Gavla. That's the mountain that he lived in. Beligyonin are legions. Sagi, and many legions of armies. He came with all of his officers. And he comes to Hebron. V'lohava shavik leYosef. He didn't allow Yosef to bury his father. B'ma'oras kafelton, Ma'oras HaMachpelah. Minyad, immediately. Azal Naphtali went, he ran. Unachas means he descended to Mitzrayim. Va'asi returned on that very day. Okay, that's very quick. Va'aisi oinisa, he brings the document that Esav wrote to Yaakov, his brother, al palgus ma'aris kafelta, on the half which was supposed to be Esav's that he had already sold it to Yaakov. Uminyad, right away, Ramaz, l'cher, this means that Naphtali hinted to Chushim, the son of Don. So this is already a different version than the Gemara says. He hints to Chushim. V'notal saifa. Chushim took a sword, not a baseball bat. The Gemara said he took a kulf, which is a chunk of wood. He took a sword. V'kotar reisha de Esav. He severed Esav's head. V'havareisha de Esav misgalgol. Esav's head was rolling. Ad da'al l'goy ma'arta, till it entered the cave. Va'asnach, and it landed. It rested. B'goy itfei de Yitzchak, in the lap of Yitzchak, his father. As we know, the Esav's head is by Yitzchak's lap. The Gufe, what happened to Esav, the rest of his body, Kavoru benoid, the Esav's sons buried, Bechakal Kafelt, in the field. The Ma'aras HaMachpelah is the cave, but it's part of a larger field that Avram bought. Esav's buried in that field. Right, not in the cave, right near the cave. His head's in the cave, his body's right nearby in the field. Ubasar Canaan, now the coast was clear. Kavaru Yosei Benoy Yankiv, Yankov's kids buried him in the cave of Chakal Kafelta that Avram bought. Fine. So this is the story in Targum Yonason. If you look in the Medrash of Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, I don't have it here, but he says the same thing as the Targum Yonason. It's in Hebrew, would have been an easier read, but I think the Aramaic gives a bit of a, spices it up. So what says the Chidah? So if you look at the other versions of the story of Chushim, it says Chushim killed Esav. He took a sword, chopped off his head. The Gemara says it was a piece of wood, and Esav's eyes fell out. Okay, but who said the Gemara disagrees with the fact that Chushim was a one-man show and killed Esav completely? In other words, if you look at the other versions of Chushim's activity, he was a one-man show. Nobody helped him. Fine. Look at the next page, number 8. Number 8 is Medrash Tehillim. It'll all come clear momentarily. This is in Medrash Tehillim, right? So we all begin our Bar Mitzvah Maimer, Esav Medrash Tehillim. So this is it. It's also known as the Medrash Shoichar Toiv. It's in Kapitel Yud Ches. It says the following. Messiris Haggadah, here we have a tradition, Yehuda Harag Esav, Yehuda killed Esav. Amosai when? So the Medrash says, you know when Yehuda killed Esav? Not in this week's parasha. Not when Yankov died. It was when Yitzchak died, years earlier. B'shor shemeis Yitzchak, when Yitzchak died. And the Medrash here tells a fascinating story. When Yitzchak died, and again, that was while Yankov was still in Eretz Yisrael, while Yosef was still lost. What?
It's a vampire.
He's loving this.
B'shor shemeis Yitzchak, when Yitzchak died. So Yosef is in Egypt. Yosef is in jail, still in jail. Just getting these, still in jail. Anyhow, Holchu Yankov Esav. Yaakov went, and his good brother Esav and all the Shvatim went to bury Yitzchak. Now Rivka's already dead. Rivka's died, long before. The Chsivit says, "Vayikburu Esav, Esav Yankov Banav." We know that Esav and Yankov got together on that day that Yitzchak died. We know that, and we know that Esav went first. He said, "I'm the Bechar, I go first." They went into the cave. The Oimdin Ubaychin, Yankov and Esav were crying. They were both crying. V'hashvatim Oimdin v'cholkin kovad liYankov. And the Shvatim got up and they said, you know what? We don't want to see our father cry like this. They left the cave. V'yotzu chutzlam, they left the cave. Kedei shelo yehe Yankov nimis, so Mizbazel Yankov shouldn't be... Exactly. They shouldn't see him in a vulnerable state. Hishchil atzmoi Esav v'nichnas l'ma'ara. Esav went into the cave after Yaakov.
What is Hishchel?
They honestly, it has a star there. That means in the bottom of the Medrash it would have said. I don't have it here. Maybe he went in stealthily. He bent. Either way, Esav said, this is my opportunity. Because Esav, look at number 9 for a second. After Yaakov took the brachas, Vayistam Esav, number 9, the next one, Esav hated Yaakov on the bracha that Yaakov received from Yitzchak. And Esav said, Beliboy, let me wait until my father passes away, and I will kill my brother Yaakov. Esav didn't want to kill Yaakov while Yitzchak's alive, because he knew he would cause his father pain. The day my father dies, boom! Yaakov's a goner. So back to number 8. This was the day that Yitzchak died. This is Esav's opportunity to take his vengeance. So Nichnas Yehuda Achrav, Yehuda went into the cave. So Yaakov's in. Esav is coming behind Yaakov. Yehuda's coming from behind Esav. Omar, and Yehuda says, Shemuhu hoyreg la'abba b'fnim. Maybe Esav's going to kill my father. Hishchil atzmai. So he went in. V'nichnas umatza es Esav. Yehuda sees Esav, standing behind Yankov, about to pounce and kill him. Shoyim mevakish larek esaviv. So miyad right away, Amad Yehuda stood up and he kills Esav from the back. V'lama loy hargu mineged panav. I love this medrash. How do you kill someone from the back? Coward! You kill someone that's from the front. You got to kill him from the. Why did you kill him from? Why didn't he kill him face to face? You know what the answer is? Shoy cluster panav doimus leYankov. Esav looked like Yaakov. Esav looked very similar to Yaakov.
Identical?
Even though Esav was hairy and he was red, first of all, many hold he was only red when he was born, and the redness faded. In fact, when Esav was born, he didn't get a bris milah. He was so red it was dangerous. And Yitzchak said, let's wait. And he waited until the blood, the redness subsided somewhat. And at that point, when Esav was older, there's a big machlokes in Midrashim if Esav ultimately got a bris or he didn't get a bris. But even those that hold he didn't, hold he could have. But he defied the mitzvah of having a bris because the blood had subsided. So he would have looked like Yankov. This depends on a previous year we had, if they were the same egg that split, or were they identical twins or not. We saw it at Yonis Leibishitz about that. It all depends on who was formed first and who was the real firstborn, etc. Fine.
Identical.
It says here they looked very similar.
Identical,
right? Yeah, right. So therefore, Yehuda couldn't kill Esav from the front. It would look like his father. He couldn't do it. Lekach cholak lekaved. He gave Esav a certain honor. I'm not killing you from the front. You look like my father. I'll kill you from the back. V'hu sha'adviv mevarcha, and this is what it means in this week's parsha when Yankov tells Yehuda, Yadcha ba'eref avecha, your hands at the neck of your enemy. So what do you see from this medrash? Yeah, you can learn Yaakov, or maybe he gave Esav that much. I don't know. On one hand, killing someone from the back might be an honor because they don't have fear. When you don't see it coming, there's less fear. Yeah, the Chayr Kabod refers to Yaakov. But either way, what do you see from here? You see from here that you want to know the whole story of Yehuda killing Esav. It has nothing to do with Chushim. It happened years before, not when Yankov died, when Yitzchak died. Yehuda was the only one in the cave. So the Chidah's issue, now you understand the Chidah's issue. He says, Tosfos quotes a Sifri, he quotes a Yerushalmi, which just says that Yehuda killed Esav. No details, right? He quotes a Gemara in Saita, which gives part of the story of Chushim ben Dan. Okay, so if you quote a bit of this story, a bit of that story, you could kind of fuse them together. But says the Chidah, if you look at the whole story, you'll realize the two things, they cannot fit together. They cannot coexist. The story the Yerushalmi and Sifri are referring to is here in Medrash Tilim.
So how does the whole story connect? He was killed much before.
No, so it's a machlekes of what happened. But Tosfos can't stick them together. No one holds that Chushim started and Yehuda finished. That's the Chidah's kasha. He says, the story the Sifri Yerushalmi are referring to must be the story of Medrash Tilim, which was Yehuda and only Yehuda that went into the cave when Yitzchak had passed away. And Yehuda knocks off Esav. Chushim wasn't there, B'chlal. Conversely, the story that the Gemara in Saita says about Chushim, well, if you see the way that story is in Targum Yonis, picture of Eliezer, it was also only Chushim, because he had a sword and severed Esav's head. So what's Tosfos doing? Why is Tosfos trying to synthesize two different traditions which beferish do not work hand in hand? And the Chidah asks this in at least 6 of his Sfarim. So he's very bothered by this. Fine. I want to tell you that there's actually another opinion of when Esav died and who killed him. It's found in Yalkut Shimoni, in Parshas Vayishlach. I don't have it on the sheet. It says there Yaakov killed Esav. It wasn't Yehuda. It wasn't Chushim. It was Yankov. When? When Leah died. It says in Yalkut Shimoni, Leah died, and Yankov went to bury her in Maras HaMachpelah. And Esav came and wanted to stop him. Now you wonder, why is he stopping him? Yankov at least has one portion in the cave. Well, maybe because, like the Zohar says, Esav always loved Leah, and he had this, you had her the whole, now she's dead, Esav blew it. Maybe Kolzman Leah was alive again. She died, it says that in the early 50s. Maybe Esav was still dreaming of one day marrying her. And now that she's dead, he blew it. I'm just adding that. But it says in the Yalkut Shimoni that Esav came and he started throwing arrows, shooting arrows to where Yankov and his sons were staying. And Yankov went and he started to reason with Esav, to talk sense to him. Put down your bow and arrow, let's have a menschlich conversation. And the Medrash says his words fell on deaf ears. Esav said, I'm not talking. So Yehuda told Yaakov, Tata, until when are you going to negotiate with terrorists? We got to knock him off. At which point Yaakov took his arrow, his bow and arrow, he sent an arrow, he pierced Esav. Esav became extremely ill from the arrow. His kids quickly took him to Chveis. They called Hatzalah, took him to a nearby hospital. And the Yalkut Shimoni says one opinion is he died there. Another opinion is that Esav recovered. But one opinion is he died there. Which means that Yankov killed him when Leah was being buried. So we have three shittas. The last one is Yankov killed Esav when Leah was being buried. You have the Medrash Tilim that Yehuda killed him when Yitzchak was being buried, and Yehuda walks into the cave. It's amazing to imagine. You have Yitzchak, Yankov is standing next to his father crying. Esav is standing behind Yankov with a knife about to kill Yankov. And Yehuda is the fourth guy behind, and he kills Esav. That's the story in Medrash Tilim. And then you have the story in Saita, in Targum Yonason, in the Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, that Esav dies in this week's parsha. He dies because he wanted to prevent Yankov from being buried, and at that point Chushim killed him. So you have three versions. Let's just see for a second number 10 and 11. Number 10 is another Medrash Tilim. It's in Kapitel Yudalit. We always say Esav had something good going for him. The honor he had to his father. Says in Medrash Tilim, Vayomer Esav b'libi, on the pasuk we just saw in number 9. Esav said in his heart, let me wait until Yitzchak dies, and I'll take vengeance against my brother. Ma Choshav, says the Medrash, what was Esav thinking in his mind? Omar hat gesagt azay. Ein derech ha'olam she'eroiges Abba. Said Esav, it's not menschlich for me to kill my father. Which means he was the greater man of Kibbud Av, he was entertaining the possibility of knocking off his father Yitzchak. But he said, it's a pasnish to kill Yitzchak. Ela ani oimer li Yishmol achiv. I'm going to get Yishmol to kill my father Yitzchak. That was Esav's plan. Esav knew that his father and Yishmol had a fallout many years before. He was going to go rile up, his uncle Yishmol, set his uncle Yishmol against his father. V'hu hargoi. Yishmol would knock off Yitzchak. V'ani hoirigas Yaakov v'achin, I'll kill Yaakov. Why didn't he stam go kill Yaakov? Because he knew Yitzchak would be pained, which is incredible. He didn't want to pain his father, but he was happy to hire a hitman.
Well,
Strangest thing. How does that make any sense?
Maybe like the guy's like, oh, he's already old. It won't make a difference,
Maybe
Then he could stam kill Yaakov. Like, why does he have to knock off Yitzchak? It's very strange. Why does he have to knock off his father? Because he wants to kill Yaakov. He doesn't want Yitzchak to be here to witness it, because he doesn't want his father to suffer. And is happy to knock off his father, to hire a hitman? Strangest thing. Continues the Medrash. But Esav's not done. Va'onu, and then me and Yishmol, Yorshim Esa'olam will yarshin the ganze Welt. But kach loy hoya Esav oimer befiv. Now Esav never said this, but the pasuk said he said in his heart. Elu beliboy hoya mechashav. He thought in his mind that what? That after Yishmol hoirigas of Yishmol, and it repeats it, but it adds a detail here. Yishmol will kill my father Yitzchak. Va'ani es achai.
And I'm a brother.
Right. Ona bo bedinim Yishmol, and then I will fight with Yishmol and I'll kill him. Vani Yeresh, and I'm the last man standing. Exactly, yeah. And I'm the last man standing. So I'm going to get I'll rile up Yishmol to kill Yitzchak.
If he Keep on filling
Once
it out.
Yitzchak's gone, I have no problem with killing Yaakov.
Setting up.
And then I kill Yishmael, and I'm the only inheritor, from all the money, that was in Avrech Veis. I'm an Ayash the ganze Welt. As I state in Medrash Tillin.
Tell which brother has the highest chance of success.
Look at number 11, on the same pasuk of number 9, on the same discussion. This is from Targum Yonason again. The Notar Esav Sona Belibe. Esav harbored resentment in his heart against Yaakov, Achi, his brother. I'll say the bichasa because of the blessings the Baruch Yahweh that his father Yitzchak had given Yaakov. The Amr Esav Belibe. Esav said in his heart, Leis ana Ovid heichma da Ovid Kayin. I'm not going to do what Kayin did. Kayin caught Al Yos Hevel. Kayin made a big mistake. Kayin killed Hevel while Adam was still alive. So what did Adam do? He had more kids. Kayin killed Hevel b'chai yavui while his father Adam was alive. So what did his father do? Well, it took 130 years. Well, there's a debate exactly when Kayin killed Hevel. One opinion is it was in the year 40. And so it's 90 years later when Adam gives birth to Shes. But either way, V'hader Avui, his father went back. V'olid Yoshem, and he had another kid. Shes. He had another kid, Shes. So what did Kayin gain? He still has a rival. Says Esav, I'm gonna take a smarter route. Baram Misakavana, I'm gonna wait. Ad desman de yimtun yoimei evela de Mrs. Abba. I'm gonna wait till my father dies. You see, if I kill Yaakov, Yitzchak's gonna have more kids. So I'm not gonna hurt Yaakov. Yitzchak won't feel any urgency to have more children. And then when Yitzchak passes away, and Yaakov's in Avelus, ubechein ana kotel yos Yaakov, I'll kill my brother. Va'ana mishtakach kotel v'yoris. And it'll turn out I'm a murderer and yet I'm inheriting. It's almost like what Eliyahu Hanavi said to Achav by the vineyard of Navas. You killed and you want to inherit. Tzachta v'gam yorashta, you killed and you want to inherit. It could be that's what Esav's saying. I'll be the murderer, yet I'm going to inherit everything. There was actually a big shaila in Eretz Yisrael a number of years ago. There was a secular judge in Eretz Yisrael. The case came that there was a fellow that killed, I believe it killed his father, and the shaila was, does a kid inherit? You kill your relative, deliberately do you inherit? And the judge was so unsure, he went to Reb Asher Weiss, the big Rav now in Yerushalayim, the Minchas Asher, and he asked him, what does he think? So the Minchas Asher says, halachically, really, you should. The fact is, inheritance is inheritance. The Torah doesn't say that if you get inheritance illegally, you don't deserve it. What do you mean? Inheritance is a fact. The father died; it goes to the kid. But he quoted this pasuk of Eliyahu with Achav. It's a story that Achav killed. Naboth's vineyard. He orchestrates the death of Navos to get the vineyard, because the vineyard was next door to his vacation home, his vacation palace. And Eliyahu said, you killed him and you want to inherit? So Asher Weiss Tainers that he thinks based on that pasuk, Rabbonim today have the right to remove somebody's rights of inheritance if the way they got it was through murder.
So
Based on
naturally
that
they
pasuk.
should inherit, but there's a right to remove it.
Yeah, Hefker, Bezdin, Hefker. The Bezdin has the right. But based on this story in Malachim. Anyhow, the point is, why did I put these on the sheets? I don't remember. But you see that these are different explanations of what Esav was waiting for. If you think Esav was waiting for Yaakov, Yitzchak to pass away, he loved his father. He didn't want us to see his father in pain if he kills Yaakov. You see from number 11 that he wanted Yitzchak to die, because if he kills Yaakov while his tata is alive, Yitzchak will have more kids, and Esav will just have more rivals. You see in number 10 that he actually wanted to orchestrate the death of Yitzchak through Yishmael. But you see from there, though, how serious he was about killing Yaakov the moment Yitzchak has died. So that helps you understand number 8, the version of the Medrash Tillim. That Taka, when Yitzchak died, and Yaakov and Esav were in that case, Esav said, this is my moment, I've been waiting for this. And he stood behind Yaakov about to kill him, and Yehuda enters in the nick of time. So Akapanim, though, That's one version of the story. Yehuda kills Esav. There's no Chushim. Chushim's B'chlal not there at all. It's when Yitzchak died. You have the story in Saita, in Targum Yonasan and Pirkei de Rabbi Lezer, that Chushim killed Esav at the time of the burial of Yankov in this week's parasha. It's two separate stories. So the Chidor wants to know that Tosfos in number 5 makes no sense. Tosfos is trying to synthesize the two together. They're definitely standalone versions. They don't fit. So we're going to see two answers. And fascinating stuff. Okay, the first one is quite simple. The second one is quite fascinating. The first one the Chidor offers, and again he asks this in about 6 of his photos. The Gemara says in Baba Basra, and you'll find it in many Medrashim, there's an old tradition that Yidden have. You know, the Romans have their tradition that Yehuda killed Esav, and we have our tradition. And our tradition is Ein Esav Neufel Ela Biyad Boneha Shel Rachel. Esav's kids will only fall in the hands of Rachel's Einiklach. Like Amalek, who come from Esav, and Shaul, who comes from Binyamin, knocks him out. So Esav, his kids, Amalek, is falling into the hands of Boneha Shel Rachel. That was an example. Mordechai, by the Purim story, knocking off Haman. Again, Esav, because Haman's an Amaleki coming from Esav, falls in the hands of Boneha Shel Rachel. So says the Chidor, you know what Tosfos was bothered with? Tosfos was bothered with, how could Yehuda kill Esav? I thought Esav has to fall into the hands of Rachel's Einiklach. Chushim comes from Dan, the only kid of Dan. Dan is the son of Bilah, who was the maidservant of Rachel. So he's somewhat considered from the family of Rachel. So the Chidor says it could be like this. Tosfos knows that if you look at the background of the two versions of the story, they don't fit. But if you just look at the Sifri the way it is, if you look at the Rishami the way it is, that Yehuda killed Esav, maybe they're not going together with the Medrash Tilim. Maybe the Sifri and the Rishami are stam saying Yehuda killed Esav, right? The Gemara in Saita, the version in Saita of Chushim, doesn't say he picked up a sword and severed Esav's head. He picked up a piece of wood and knocked out the eyes. So these versions you could stick together. So Tosfos said if you're able to, you must. Because the version of Yehuda by itself is problematic. I thought Esav needs to fall into the Boneha Shel Rachel. Since Chushim somehow, to some degree, satisfies the requirement of Boneha Shel Rachel, that's why Tosfos wanted to put the two together. That's one option that he says. But the second thing, and this is discussed by many Mekubalim, is the following. Go to number 12. The Pasuk says, Yankov and Esav grow up, Vayigdalu Hana'arim, they become Bar Mitzvah. And Yankov's a good boy, he's sitting and learning. What's Esav doing? Yodei Etzai, he knows how to hunt. Ish Sada is a man of the field. He's a man of the field. What does it mean he knows how to hunt? What does it mean a man of the field? Let's actually jump to number 14 for a second, out of order, but in the Sefer Yalkut HaUrim, written about 100 years ago, incredible Pirush on Chumash, Hevi, he says, you know what it means that Esav was Yodei Etzai, he knew how to hunt. Ish Sada, a man of the field. It's not two separate statements. You think it's two statements. Esav knew how to hunt. He was a man of the field. Says the Yalkut HaUrim, no. It means he knew how to hunt the man of the field. Yodei Etzai and Ish Sada, he knew how to hunt the man of the field. What's the man of the field? Let's see. Al Pidachaya Adnei Hasada Hanizkir Be'iv. There's an animal called the Adnei Hasada. It's mentioned in Eiv as Avnei Hasada. Hanikra Yidoini, it's known as the Yidoini. We once mentioned this in a shir. There's a black magic called Yidoini. What is it? So we saw once the Sefer HaChinuch quotes from the Go'enim before him that there's a certain animal which looks like a human. It's attached to the ground via its belly button. There is some type of rope or wire, a cord, which is attaching this animal to the ground, and the animal is vild like you can't imagine. If anything encroaches into its domain, it will pounce and rip it apart. And the only way to overcome this animal is you shoot an arrow from far, and you have to sever that cord, and the animal dies right away. And then you take a bone from this animal, and this is the Yid'oni that the Torah speaks about. Hanikra Yid'oni. It says 3 names. Yid'oni, it's called the Adnei Hasoda in Mishnayos, it's called the Avnei Hasoda in Eiv. Sheniksheres b'tabur large is attached by its belly button to the ground. V'kosher, it's so hard to hunt it. Rak ba'ofen shezorkin ches, you have to throw an arrow. Lahafsik tabura, to break off its belly, that cord, and then it dies. And this is the Yid'oni sheloikhin etzem imenu. You take a bone, b'soich hapeh, you put the bone in your mouth. V'oisin kishuf, and with black magic, leimar says to tell the future. When the Torah says Esav was Yedei Tzayid, he knew how to hunt. Ish Sada, it's one statement. He knew how to hunt the man of the field. He knew how to hunt this animal. And Esav knew how to hunt it. And therefore Esav was able to tell the future, because he was practicing his black magic of Yidoni. And that's what it means, Vayi Esav Ish Asher Yedei Tzayid, he knew how to hunt. Ratzaloymar, he knew how to hunt the Ish Sada, the Adnei Sada Hayidoni. Ubazeh, with this he would say the future. And he would come to his father Yitzchak. And they would talk about the future together. And Yitzchak's like, wow! Esav must have something going. He thought Esav was a holy man. What he didn't realize was Esav received this knowledge through black magic. V'rama, V'rima, he tricked to Yitzchak. That's how Esav tricked, a whole new pshat, how Esav tricked his father. He practiced the black magic of Yidoni. His father thought he had Ruach HaKodesh, but it was just black magic. And that's what the pasuk means.
Who's
This is from the Sefer Pardas Yosef. He's quoting the Yalkut Torah. An incredible thing, and that hinted in the pasuk. Esav Yodei, he knew how to hunt the Ish Sada. But go back to number 12. This is from Targum Yonason, again a third one. You know what it means? It's a fascinating thing. V'roviyu Talaya, number 12. The young kids grew up. V'hava Esav. Esav was a Gvar Nachshirchan. And this is the key word, what Nachshirchan means. We'll see what it means. Lemitzai to hunt, to catch oifen, birds, v'chevan, animals. Gvar Nofik Chakal, he was a man that went to the field. Ketil Nafshin, he killed people. Hukatoya, he killed Nimrod, and Nimrod's son Chanoich. But Yankov was a Gvar, and Yankov was a complete person in his actions. He was Meshamish in the base Medrash of Shem. You're too loud?
Morse code.
What?
Being fun upstairs, leave them alone.
Base Medrash of Eiv. Fine. Targum Yonason says, you know what it means that Esav was a Yedei Tzayid Ish Sada? Gvar Nachshirchan. What does that mean? So look at number 13. There's something called the Pirush Yonason. I don't know who wrote it, but it's a great Pirush. And he brings here three options of what Yonason means. Pirush, first he quotes Taisus and Baba Kama. Shehi kamay kina desharchi. Pirusha, what that means is Ilanas betalin, trees which are bottle, not fruitful. She'einois in peri. A tree which cannot give off fruits is called in Gemara sharchi. Sharchi. V'cheinu adam bottle she'einois malach. A person that sits around, a ladiger, a guy sits around and does nothing. He's like a tree that doesn't give off fruit. And the Gemara refers to such trees with the word of sharchi. So when Yonason, Targum Yonason says Esav was Nachshirchan, Nach means he rested, and Shirchan means he was doing nothing. Esav was a lady guy, did nothing. He was walking around, that's why he got into so much trouble. Right, he had time on his hands. V'cheinu b'tshuvas harashba. So the Rashba and Tosfos say Esav was Pashut, a man who was up to trouble because he... You know what they say, if you want something to be done, give it to a busy man. He'll give it to his secretary. When people have nothing to do, they get up to try. Anyways, Aval ha'aruch goyrus bedalus. The Aruch says it's not nachshirchen, it's nachshidchen. Miloshin vayashoichu hamayim. It says by the Mabul that the water rested. V'targum, you know what Unkla says there? Ishtadochu maya. The word ishtadoch in Aramaic means resting. V'chein gvar dishadchin. So the Aruch was a Rishon, one of the early Rishonim, Reb Nosson of Rome, in the 11th century, one of the early Rishonim. He says the correct version is Esav was a man who was nachshidchan, meaning he was an Adam Shakir, he was quiet. You think Esav would walk into the room and roar? No. He was a stealthy person, quiet. He would attack when nobody was expecting. But then we come to the Tziyoni. This is the big one. What?
Hunters do that.
Right, exactly. They don't want to spoil the surprise. Vampires, by the way, that's how they approach people.
Yeah.
They approach people stealthily and they attack. So that's another rhyme. Anyhow, but here we go. We come to the Tziyoni. Who's the Tziyoni? Menachem Tziyoni was a Rishon. He was born in around the year 1340, 1350. He's born in Germany, in Speyer, in Germany. He went to Yerushalayim to learn a little bit, and that's why he became known as the Tziyoni. Yerushalayim is Tzion. In fact, when he wrote his big work, Tziyoni, which is a Pirush al Chumash, he says, I'm calling it Tziyoni because that's where I learned in Yerushalayim. I love Jerusalem, I love Eretz Yisrael. Anyhow, he was a big Kabbalist, and his Pirush is full of Kabbalah. He quotes some Zohar, which was already rampant in his times. He quotes some other Kabbalistic sources, philosophy as well. We once had a shir about him. Reb Moshe Feinstein said it's also to learn his Sefer. Because in his Sefer, there are some strange things which are found. One of them is the Tziyoni quotes from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, that Parshas Chukas really should be much longer than it is. When the Yidden sang over the well in Parshas Chukas, so in the Parsha of Chukas, there's one or two psukim that they said, very little, small song. The song was much longer. It was in Tehillim, the Halal Hagadol that we say, every Shabbos we say before Baruch Shamar, the Halal Hagadol, that was all in the Chumash. David took it out and put it in Tehillim. That's what the Tziyoni brings from Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. So somebody wrote, yeah, you heard me, yeah. So somebody wrote to the Moshe Feinstein, what do we do with this? So Moshe says, Kfira, it's blasphemous to say that about David. He says, and Moshe says, we don't know who the Tziyoni is. He didn't know. He says, we don't know much about who the Tziyoni is. He says, I think, Rav Moshe says, that Tziyoni, this Rabbi Nachum, he found some manuscript in the name of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid that said this outlandish statement, and the Tziyoni put it in the Sefer without thinking. And Rav Moshe says that I think we should write to all the rabbis in Israel. It's also to sell the Sefer, because who knows what's written in the Tziyoni, you can't trust what it says. Menashe Klein, the big Rav in Borough Park, he says, what? The Shalach quotes the Tziyoni many times. The Megal Al-Mukas quotes him. The Magen Avraham quotes him in Shulchan Aruch. I mean, everybody quotes the Tziyoni. Reb Moshe says we don't know who he is. He's not an obscure person. He's everywhere. The Chidah in Shem HaGdolim says about the Tziyoni. He said it's an awesome sefer. It's a sefer noira, awesome sefer. He says how he quotes Kabbalah and he has his Kabbalistic interpretations. The Chidah gives him a complete endorsement. Ramasha Klein writes he doesn't believe that Rav Moshe wrote this. Rav Moshe didn't believe that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid said what people said he said. Masha Klein says I don't believe Rav Moshe said there's a.
How does he reconcile?
He said he was
How do you answer that thing? So we had a shir about in Parshas Chukas, Menashe Klein's theory, and we found many sources to this. Besides for the Chumash, Moshe wrote other works. Moshe wrote lots of, and many of the stories of Chumash, Moshe wrote a longer version. He wrote a lot more about Bilam. The Gemara in Bava Basra says Moshe wrote his Sefer, which is the Chumash, and he wrote Parshas Bilam. It's a different Sefer. He wrote in this other Sefer, Moshe wrote the whole song the Yidden sang, which there it had the whole Hallel. David took it from there and put it into Tehillim. That's what the Tziyoni means.
Moshe wrote part of Tehillim anyways.
Right, some exactly. Yeah. Right, exactly. That's what Menashe Klein wants to say. But Moshe Feinstein Mamish, he came up.
One of the Dead Sea Scrolls from what time? Because there the Torah is the same.
Dead Sea Scrolls are later.
After?
Right. To say David took it out, we're talking about way back when. No, it's probably from way later. Yeah. By Shane or even later, yeah. Anyhow, so the Tzioni does write some.
So what does he write here?
So what does he write? Hatzioni Goyres, the Tzioni says, Shnei Milas. It's meant to be 2 words. Nochosh Yarchon. Go back to number 12 when Yonason says Nachshirchon is 2 words. Nochosh Yarchon. It means Esav had a tattoo of a snake on his thigh. Shahaya Simon Nochosh al Yereich Shal Esav. Esav had a tattoo of a snake on his thigh. Lirma is to hint to the fact that he's Mesitra de Nachash. He is from the side of the snake, like it's brought in Zohar. And this is an idea that Tzioni says this. The Shalah quotes this as well. The Shalah says you got to know. The Shalah says you got to know what the Tzioni says. Esav had Esav's tattoo, the vampire's tattoo.
This is nothing.
Esav's tattoo was a snake. What?
This has nothing to do with the stick he carried around for hunting and that stuff.
Right. The sword, he had a special sword from the sword he had. He got the sword. Avron's was a Shelach sword. He got a miraculous sword.
What is his there?
Talking about killing Nimrod
That
here.
the Zohar says that Esav is from the sea. Esav's energy is from the original Nachash, the Nachash by Gan Eden, the Satan. That's Esav's energy. Esav's energy is the Nachash, and it to the point that Begashmis he had a tattoo of a snake. The Shem Mishmul, the Avnei Nezer's son, there's a Chassidish Rebbe, the Shem Mishmul, the times of the Rebbe Rashab. He says Esav was born with this tattoo. He was born with it. Esav came out and he was born with this tattoo. Strange. Well, he didn't put it on. Very strange. The Shem Mishmul was a big Rebbe, you know. There's actually a wonderful story that the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avraham of Sochitshov, so he was in the times of the Rebbe Rashab. He was a big Chassidish Rebbe, a Gaon in learning in Nigla. He was a son-in-law of the Kotzke. He was a big guy, and it was once on Simchas Torah, the Avnei Nezer had a chassid who never had kids, and begging his Rebbe, and the Avnei Nezer always avoided the question. Once on Simchas Torah, he sees the Avnei Nezer is smiling. His face is shining. The chassid thinks, now's the time. He runs over to his Rebbe and says, Rebbe, please, a bracha for a kid. So the Avnei Nezer tells him, Willst a kind a galach? You want a kid who's going to be a galach? The chassid turns white, shocked! He never asked his Rebbe again. The Avnei Nezer passes on, and the Shem Mishmul, his son, the Shem Mishmul becomes Rebbe. And again, it was once on Simchas Torah, and this chassid by now is already chveis, he's already a bit older, he's given up on never having kids, and he was a broken man. He wasn't joining the Hakafas, he was sitting on the side, and the Shem Mishmul was, in the mood of Simchas Torah. And during Hakafas, he walks over to the Yid. He tells him, what are you sitting here on the side? I'm going to give you a bracha. I want you to say Amen. I'll give you a bracha. You should have a boy. And the chassid turns pale. And he says, your tata told me that the kid's going to be a galach. So the Shem Mishmul closed his eyes. He thought for a moment. And he says, von deswegen, nonetheless, say Amen. He said Amen. The guy had a boy. The boy grows up. And the Holocaust happens. And Nazis came to the city, killed everybody. This boy, he masqueraded as a galach. The Nazis didn't touch him. He survived the Holocaust. He threw off the galach and he was a Fruma Yid again. So it's incredible how, that's like Hamtokas Hagvuras, to sweeten the severities. The Tata said he's going to be a galach, and it's true. But we can, in Simchas Torah today, we can fine-tune it a little bit. Yeah, he'll be a galach, and that's going to save his life. So the Shem Mishmul says he was born with this. He was born with this. Now, what does this represent? What's this tattoo of the snake? Well, the Zohar says because Esav was an embodiment of the original Nachash HaKadmoni. B'chlal, we know that ultimately when Mashiach comes, two things have to happen. We're going to destroy Esav. B, we're going to rectify the original sin. The reason why we're still suffering today is because of the sin of Adam. Ultimately, when that sin will be completely rectified and Esav will be destroyed, it's because it's one and the same thing. That's when Mashiach's going to come. Who's the antithesis to Esav? Who's the Jewish Nachash? Who's the Jewish Nachash? Don. Yihidon Nachash Ale Derech. Don is a snake. Shfifan Al Yerech, he's a snake. Chushim, who's the son of Don, Chushim is the same gematria of Nachash. You turn the Yud and the Mem into a Nun, and Has Nachash. Chushim is the letters of Nachash. Don was a Nachash. Don is the spiritual antidote to Esav. He's the only one that could knock off Esav. Yehuda can't do it. Yehuda's a lion. But which other Shev is compared to a lion? Also Don. Don Gurarian says Don is compared to... We discussed about who ultimately, right, who ultimately killed Bilam. So, the Kabbalists write that this is the Pshat in Tosfos. The reason why Tosfos is trying to fuse the things together, Tosfos doesn't quote the Medrash Tillim, because that version there's no room for Don. And he's not quoting the Targum Yonason or the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, because that has no room for Yehuda. But if you quote the Gemara's version of Don, of Chushim, the son of Don, it doesn't say clearly that Chushim finished him off. When you look at the Yerushalmi and the Sifri that says Yehuda killed Esav, it doesn't say the whole story. Maybe Chushim was also involved in that version. So since you're able to synthesize those versions, Tosfos wants to do it. Because Yehuda can't do it by himself. Esav is a Nachash. He is the Nachash HaKadmoni. That's why he had the tattoo. That's who he was. He was an embodiment. That was his energy. The Jewish antidote, the antithesis of Esav is the Yiddish Nachash. Yehidon Nachash Ale Derech, which was Don, who was the Nachash, and his son, Chushim. Those letters. And it's fascinating, the Zohar Chodesh says that Mashiach ben David, his father comes from David, his mother comes from Don. Another state in Zohar, the mother of Mashiach comes from Don. Because you need to, right, Chushim is Oishes Mashiach, right. That's the same word, because in order to knock off Esav, right, you can't just have Yehuda. Yehuda's the Melech, right? Mashiach ben David comes from Yehuda because that's the Malchus. But he can't. Mashiach ben David doesn't have the power just to knock off Esav. He needs to come from Don, from the Mama side, because that's the Yiddish Nachash. So and this is all. So this is what the Shalot talks about, the Chidah talks about. Everybody talks about it, and it's all based on the Tziyoni's Pshat in the Targum Yonason of Nachshircha. So according to the Moshe Feinstein, you can't read the Tziyoni, so you can't give the shir.
We
But
discussed that language, and that Moshe Feinstein was not.
that's
Moshe
why.
Feinstein.
Two things, by the way, that
Oh,
are
Bechlal didn't go.
No, some of it was going to them.
Yeah, you are.
at the beginning of Vayigash. I think the Sefer Yosher says that Yehuda called Chushim to fight against Yosef. The two of them stood together and they started,
No, that's mine.
roaring or whatever it was.
Child, why would Chushim have been there in the beginning of
He wasn't
Vayigash?
there.
He called him to come.
He called, when he screamed, he was calling Chushim. Chushim came running.